issues with them as far as being able to get the facts down right. So I wanted to reiterate that we do these videos every week. So if there's a problem in knowing how to spell the speaker's name, or if there's some section of the presentation that you didn't get, you can always go on to Sakai and watch the video. They're broken down into several parts, so you don't necessarily have to watch the whole thing over and over again. Okay, so that's available for you to use. Okay, so next time I'd like you to submit your summaries electronically into the Dropbox. This is because we have outcomes and assessment at URI, and this class is one of the classes that we're going to use for assessment, so I'm going to keep an electronic version of the paper for this particular week. Thereafter, back to paper, but next week you can submit it to the Dropbox. A lot easier. You don't have to worry about whether your printer has ink. Some of you are pretty excited about the textile printing lecture that we had, so there are a couple of opportunities that I wanted to let you know about. First one is that we're offering a class in dyeing and printing next fall. It's TMD 413, so those of you who are juniors might want to consider taking that class in the fall. It's with Dr. Bide, and it'll be one time, I think it's a one-day only, in the late afternoon, so know that that's up there as a possibility. Second thing is that we have a contest that's ongoing right now. Some of the students who are in 346 right now are participating in that. It's a contest to create a scarf that will be sold through the URI Alumni Association. This is a print pattern, and if you want to know more about that, you can talk to either Carl, who's aware of the stipulations, or Deborah Baronis, who teaches the 346 class this semester. So today we're really excited to have with us Lucy Dunn, who is a assistant professor at the University of Minnesota. And she's in the Department of Design, Housing, and Apparel, which is a department that I graduated from many years ago. And this week is their spring break. So she is in Boston for the week working on a project and agreed to come down to URI today to talk to you guys about wearable technology and the work that she's been doing in that area. And I found out that her family has a summer house in Narragansett, so this is not unfamiliar territory to her down here. Welcome, Lucy.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Sure. So, I'm very pleased to be here. This is what I do, wearable technology and e-textiles. I teach apparel design, which is very similar to what you guys are mostly majoring in, I think. But my research area is focused on the technology side of things, which is what I'll be talking to you about today. And I'm quite passionate about it, so hopefully you will be as well. I don't know how interactive you guys typically are in this lecture, but I'm very happy for you to interrupt me, ask for more detail, ask questions as I go along. I've tried to structure it so that there'll be time for Q&A at the end, but I often fail at that. So it's better to interrupt if you have a question, because there might not be time at the end. But there might be. You never know. Big surprise. Okay, so I'm going to just start off with a little bit of background so you know who I am. This is my lab at the University of Minnesota, the Wearable Technology Lab. And I have an assortment of graduate students and undergraduate students that work on research projects in the lab. And then some of my courses also do projects that are related to the research that's ongoing, or are collaborative with industry partners that are interested in developing in this area. So it looks like that. The lab is a smaller part of a larger umbrella organization that we started 4 years ago or so, called the Wearable Product Design Center. And as you can see, there are four labs in the Wearable Product Design Center, and they each focus on a different aspect of wearable things. All of us are apparel faculty, so we do have a strong clothing focus, but it's not necessarily limited just to clothing, but also accessories, footwear, stuff like that. And we each sort of use our own perspective to address problems or concerns or open questions related to wearable things. Okay, so that's the end of the background. So, how many of you are at all familiar with something called wearable technology? Anybody? Maybe? Yes? A little bit? How about smart clothing? How many of you heard of Google Glass? Okay, that's an example of smart clothing. Okay, so I didn't see a lot of hands. Maybe that means you're shy. Maybe that means nobody knows what I'm talking about. So we'll start off with a little bit of a definition. This is a really hard concept to define. I have my opinions, and that's what I'll be sharing with you, but they're not necessarily concrete facts. This is an area that's really emerging. There's a lot of players in that area. Each player has their own perspective and emphasis. So there are conflicting opinions of what this might mean. This is how I would define it. An artifact that's worn on the body for a functional purpose. As a small aside, I just want to take a little digression into an area that I'm not really going to focus on today. And that is that the competing, I guess, definition of what wearable technology might be is less focused on putting something on the body and more focused on the kind of interaction that you have with the thing. So Google Glass would be a good example of that. It happens to be worn on the body, but for the people that are very interested in that kind of technology, it's less important that it's on the body and more important that you have instant, seamless, continuous access to information. One of the developers of Google Glass once told me that he would call it wearable if there was a little robot that followed you around telling you everything you needed to know right at the right moment. And to me, that is not at all wearable because you're not wearing a robot. But you can see the sort of perspective difference. He really cares a lot about how you're interacting with your mobile information, your mobile devices, and less about what physical form that takes. End of my digression. So, coming back to my definition. I'm interested in things that are worn on the body for functional purposes. And I want to focus a little bit on this. So, functional purpose, that might make you start thinking that what I'm interested in is things like firefighter gear or spacesuits that have a very concrete functional purpose. But I would like to expand that definition of functional just a little bit. It certainly includes protective functions, absolutely. There's a lot of really compelling and important protective functions, but also includes those functions of expression or aesthetics, which arguably are the main reasons why we wear clothing. And that will be a theme. Okay, also I want to expand the definition of artifact. What does that mean? In smart clothing, usually it most commonly means something electronic, but I don't think that necessarily needs to be the case. I would call something like an insulated jacket a piece of wearable technology, the technology being the insulation. Even a textile is a piece of technology in some way. So I would take a very broad interpretation, but today we will focus mostly on electronics. Okay, then this little subcategory here is where I live. Wearable technology is a very broad, expansive thing. Smart clothing is the area that I think that I would concentrate in. And that can be described in two ways. One is as the intersection of technology and clothing, or technology and textiles, depending on your level of focus. Or, and this is where we start splitting hairs again, but the idea of it being smart is sometimes important. So you can have a textile that it includes something like a conductive fiber that allows information to be transmitted through it. But it doesn't inherently do anything. It just conducts electricity when electricity is present. If there's no electricity present, it just sits there. So in some cases, the idea of something being smart means that it has to be able to respond to a stimulus. So there needs to be some outside thing that triggers some response in the garment or the textile. Again, there are many examples of this that don't involve electricity. So something like a phase change textile would use the change in thermal energy of the environment to change the physical structure of the microencapsulated material so that cause that material to melt, which provides a dynamic response of the textile to the environment. Again, I'm going to focus on electronic stuff because it tends to be a little bit more versatile and more adaptable. But this idea of smart, really, embedding some sort of intelligence or adaptiveness to the garment or the textile. Okay, so the big question that I want to ask you is why would we bother to do this? Why is there wearable technology? Why do I care about it? Why do people keep talking about it? I've been working in this area for about 10 years, I guess, and there are a lot of the same themes since about 10 years ago, but one thing that has not changed is that people are still not wearing it. We're not wearing smart clothing, we don't use Google Glass, all these things have, Google Glass, the concept has been around, this guy who developed it has been wearing one since 1993. So, it's not necessarily just emerging technology, but we're not wearing it. So I want to concentrate on this question of why would we bother and why is it interesting? And obviously I have a lot of opinions on that as well. But, okay, so if we're going to be making a new kind of clothing that does new kinds of things, there needs to be a reason, right? And typically that reason has something to do with something wrong with what's there today. So what's wrong with the way we are wearing, using, making clothing? There are many things that you might point to, but one that I want to point to right now is the question of waste and abundance and how much clothing we have. So one of the problems with clothing today is that there is too much of it, we consume too much of it, we don't use it, and then we throw it away, and the effects of that are difficult in many, many areas. Okay, so if we have all this clothing and we're throwing it away constantly, why is that? This is the same as the previous slide, but in graph form. This is the number of new garments per capita per year in the US. And you can see up around 2006, we peak at about 70 new garments per person per year. Some of you in this room are like, oh yeah, definitely. And some of you are like, what? Who's buying 70 garments? And if you don't think that you buy 70 garments a year, that means somebody buys way more than 70 a year. So, it all balances out in the end. But either way, 70 is a huge number. And if this is per year, if you're not throwing out 70 garments per year, they're either building up in the home or building up as waste somewhere else. Okay, so we actually studied this. This graph led to a number of questions, important among them being where are these clothes, and what are people doing with them, and what's going on in the home that is leading to all this consumption. Because we know something about how many you buy, we know something about how many you throw away, but we don't know what you have at home. So we went and counted, but first we asked people. So first we asked people, how much of your wardrobe do you think you wear regularly? And we define regularly as once per month or more. And people across the consumer spectrum fairly reliably will tell you that they think they wear about 45% of their wardrobe regularly. That's men, women, all types of consumers, fashion leaders, fashion laggards. They all think about 44%. But then when you actually measure it, when you go in and track what they wear every day, our female participants wore 5% of their wardrobe regularly. So the difference between 45 and 5 is fairly large. And there are many reasons for that possible disparity. But either way, what it does definitely point to is that there's a lot more in the wardrobe than we're using. And even worse than this, so this is how much they actually wore, but if we calculate, so our metric is once per month or more, so if we calculate how many of their garments they could possibly have worn in a month if they never wore the same thing twice, they could only have worn 30% of their wardrobe. So it's not even possible to use what you have, never mind what you're actually doing. And the reason for gathering all this data is to learn something about what's being used, what's not being used, and try to understand that just a little bit. So then, if we know about this problem, that leads me to a few more questions. So why is it there, and what can we do? If we're consuming all this clothing, there's a reason. We don't just do it because we feel guilty about not buying enough or something. There's a reason that we want all this clothing. There's a reason it's in the home. And that it's not thrown out. I should mention that those numbers are worse than you think. These aren't every piece of clothing in your house. This is self-selected as what we call the working wardrobe. So we ask our participants to pull out from all of their clothing the clothes that they would wear to work. And we say it just that way. So they define that for themselves. What is work? What would I wear? And they pull out the stuff that they would wear to work. So what that means is that it removes the prom dresses, it removes the ratty t-shirts and the old jeans and the stuff that you just have around for emotional reasons. This is the stuff that you think you're wearing every day. And there's only 5% of it that's actually being worn. So it's all stuff you want. Well, why do you want it? Why is it there? And what can we do about that? So this is where we start bringing technology. The first thing we did was track them. So all of my clothes have these little RFID tags in them now, little washable RFID tags. And the only reason for that is so that we can allow a computer system to know something about what you're wearing. To know something about the properties of that garment and which garments are being worn together and how frequently they're being worn. So we went into our participants' wardrobes and we tagged all their garments. We recorded all the design attributes of every single garment. So that's things like what color is it, how long is it, what kind of sleeve does it have, how fitted is the sleeve, how long is it, does it have a cuff, does it have a neckline, everything you can think of about the garment. We gave it an attribute, put it in a database, and then used that to try to improve the way that people were using their clothes. So going into this study, before we knew that only 30% was even possible to be worn, we thought we could do a lot towards, shuffling up the wardrobe and helping you to wear the things that you don't remember that you have or you don't think of wearing. Because with that many garments, if you actually do the brute force numbers, if we calculate out outfits of up to 3 layers. So that'd be like a tank top and a shirt and a jacket or a sweater or something like that. And if you put all the tops with all the bottoms, you end up with about 500,000 outfits for an average size wardrobe. So clearly in the morning you're not sitting there and going through 500,000 options and trying to find the best perfect one for today. You're just getting to the point where this is good enough for right now, this meets my needs for the moment, and then you wear that. And all the psychology of decision making would reinforce a small portion of the wardrobe that's easy to remember, easy to access, maybe even visible, like you're looking at it, it's the front of the wardrobe. So we're trying to shuffle the stuff from the bottom up to the top so that you remember it and hopefully provide you a little bit of novelty in new combinations to hopefully prevent you from seeking that novelty by buying new garments. Okay, so that was what we thought. Bernard